Most e-commerce sellers try to do it all. That's why growth stalls. Today, we'll show you how to build a team that scales.
Welcome to E-commerce Revamped, powered by Miva, the engine behind seamless online stores. Now here's your host, Rob Stanley.
Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of E-commerce Revamped. Of course, I'm your host, Rob Stanley. Another great one today. This is a really good topic. So a lot of e-commerce sellers, they kind of get in that rut of, I got to do it all. I got to do it all. You spend hours of just working on things and doing all this background stuff and trying to do social media and all kinds of crazy things, instead of focusing on making sales. That's really where you want to focus on. So today we're going to be talking about how to build and outsource a team that scales, which is really important. So I got Cory Blumenfeld, and he's from BlueMoso, and we're going to bring him in the studio right now.
How's it going, everyone? Thanks for having me, Rob.
Hey, how are you doing, Cory?
I'm good. I'm super excited to talk about outsourcing. You know, I was always one of those people that thought I had to do it all, or I had to bring on a business partner to support me. And then I found the wonderful world of outsourcing, and it's kind of changed my life. Now that's what I talk about every single day.
Absolutely. You know, it is very important, especially in the steps of like building a company and as you start to get bigger. And we're going to jump right into, like, I have a first question for you. You know, what are the first steps when moving to a team, like from an individual who's running their company to a team atmosphere? What's kind of those first steps they should take?
Honestly, I think back to kind of all the businesses. So before this, I was in the tech space. I'd founded 3 companies, and it was the same mindset. Every time that I was working with a team or a business partner was working with a team, when we'd ask for instruction or when people would ask, it's everything's up here. It's all in my head, right? You know, and there's that mindset that I'm the only one that can do something. So, you know, this time around, when I was starting my new business, something that I realized I needed to do was document everything. And so when it came to outsourcing, when it comes to working with a team, the best thing you can do is document everything. It can't be in your brain. It has to be simple, clear for other people to understand. What you find easy isn't necessarily easy for everyone else, right? Because you're doing this every single day. So I think the first step is getting everything down on paper, getting everything down into Notion, Google, wherever it is, and creating those instructions to help support your team.
Absolutely. So Cory, when you mentioned, you know, getting things down, let's talk slightly about that a little bit more. I want to dive a little deeper on that. Loom videos, putting it on paper in text. What have you seen has worked best when it comes to kind of getting that stuff together and those processes together? What have you seen? Any tips or tools, that things you could kind of mention?
Yeah, when I'm working with a business owner to start, you know, the first thing I'm always saying, all they will tell me is it's all in their head. So you need to make it easy to get it out of your head. Loom, record, just be natural, record the process. You don't actually have to write everything down. As long as we have a transcript, it's easy to create the operating procedures or SOPs. So I like to use Loom. I like to record all my conversations. Any meeting that I'm having with a client or an individual, I'm recording that, and then I'm summarizing it immediately after. I'm making sure I have a really good template for how I record and break down different processes. So really at the core, and you hit the nail on the head, Loom, tools like that. There's tools like Scribe, I think, that make it easy to take meeting notes, videos, and break them down into processes.
Yeah, I think documenting in general is very important. SOPs are very important, especially, you know, sometimes what happens is people start a company, they don't realize it's going to blow up, let's say in the next 3 to 5 years, and they may be looking to exit. When you go to exit, they're going to also be looking for those SOPs, you know, so that way when it transfers from you to the other company or the people in the company, they're able to just kind of look at it and get going. And that is super important. So before I kind of jumped a little ahead, but Cory, let's back up just slightly.
Well, that's a whole other topic that I think about every single day, like setting yourself up to scale sell from day one. And we could do a whole show on that, I bet. But
absolutely,
I think that's the reason I do this, right? The reason why processes are so important is, okay, at the end of the day, one, as a business owner, a business is not the business owner, right? It has to be something greater. You'll never be able to take a vacation. You'll never be able to have free time. You'll never be able to sell it. And so that's how I think about it. So thank you for bringing that up, because that's kind of the why behind it.
Absolutely. You just brought up a good point, and that was actually the next question I was going to ask about. When is the right time to kind of outsource? You just said, when you can't take a vacation, is that the time? Or, what have you seen, Cory, working with
Yeah.
all these different companies and people on when is the right time to actually start outsourcing and delegating these tasks?
I guess there's two schools of thought here, right? Like the first school is when everything just becomes, out of control. Like that's the good problem to have, right? You get to a point where problems actually exist. And then the second piece is day one. I was speaking to a founder. He founded this really big um, uh, custom made suits company. It's global. And what he was telling me was, early on, well, do you want to build a big business? And I was like, obviously, that's what I'm trying to do. So act like it. And I think, if we're looking at building a business, right? Like, is it ever too early to delegate? Maybe, but putting all the documentation in place, writing down the SOPs, thinking like you're building something to scale is super important. So you can start the process of outsourcing, because usually when you need to outsource, right, there's a problem, and it's really like, there's a fire, you don't have the team in place, you can't keep up with demand, you can't fulfill anymore, and it might be too late if you don't have the resources in place. So I don't think it's ever too early to start preparing to delegate. For me personally, I think about doing the work up front, understanding a problem, but getting to a point where I'm ready to delegate and having all the materials, the resources in place to start handing it off to folks. I think for a lot of founders, if we're talking about what too early is, it's planning for problems that don't yet exist, right? So if you're thinking about delegating early on, but you have no clients, you have no process, you have no offer, right? You don't really have a problem that can be delegated. Right. And I don't think handing that off or outsourcing is the right point at that point, because you bring on someone, there's just going to be nothing for them to do. So I think putting summarizing, putting everything in place to delegate when you need to delegate. So the documentation, the processes, that's important to do on day one. But waiting to a point where you have a fulfillment issue, or you have too many clients, or there's fires that need to be put out, that probably is the best time to delegate.
Absolutely. I love how you brought up the whole thing about when you start a business, think big, have that mindset that this is going to be a big business. We see that way too much, too many times happen. And in fact, I've had lawyer friends on here talking about like people that just start a company, they don't trademark, they don't patent, they don't do anything, right? When it's necessary early, because people's thought process is, I just need to start making money, which is also true, right? I'm not saying you
Yeah.
shouldn't do that, but protect yourself. So you brought up a good point, Cory, about when you're starting to scale. I remember when I started hiring people, there wasn't as many like outsourced services when I was running my business. But when I kind of found that it was time to hire somebody, a couple things went through my head, and help us on maybe how people solve this, or what is the solution to this. And that is, okay, if I bring somebody on board, there's going to be a ramp up. I got a speed, the quality, there's going to take a little time. What have you seen, and how have you addressed that when people kind of bring up that whole question of ramping somebody up once they outsource?
It's interesting, because I think there's two issues that need to be solved here, right? Like for a lot of folks, the biggest challenge with outsourcing and delegation is this mindset that nobody will be able to do something as good as me, right? I'm the only one that's able to do it. And so, ramping up. Okay, so the first thing is that we talked about this, the documentation, having that all there. I think when you do finally decide you want to outsource, you have to make it clear to yourself that you are okay with 80%, right? 80% of the output. Nobody is going to be just like you. They're not going to do things the way that you do it. So when you do start to delegate, when you do start to outsource, you have to fully remove yourself. You have to hand it off, right? You have to create systems in place that allow you to be on top of everything, but not micromanage. So I think it's a lot of mindset here when you are starting to delegate. You have to trust your team. You have to give them the room to grow, right? If you can't trust them, they're not going to do their best work. So the ramping up piece is a lot of mindset. And I see this all the time with a lot of folks that are challenged, right? When it comes to bringing on a virtual assistant or bringing on other team members, they start to create a lot of issues for themselves because they are not able to let go. So that's actually one of the biggest problems that I see. The two issues and the times that we come in with a lot of business owners is, one, they have a great business, but they have no process documentation. Two, they have a great business, but they just can't let go. They can't hand off the work. They feel compelled to micromanage, and because of that, they can't scale. So that's kind of how I think about it. It's really a mindset issue.
Yeah, I think you put it right. One of the issues that people have is not documenting things, because that documentation and those processes already be in place. The handoff is so much easier. The ramp time to get somebody up to speed is so much faster. Great, well put. And that was actually covered one of the questions I was going to ask, and that was kind of, what are some of the roadblocks when outsourcing? And that's definitely one of those, is not having your paperwork in place. Let's move on a little bit. How about accountability and not over micromanaging? Once you've got this person going, and you need to kind of hold them accountable to make sure that they're doing the work that you've asked for, they're doing it correctly, and you're not over micromanaging them, and you're kind of just allowing them to do that. Like, how do you build that kind of accountability without micromanaging?
Yeah, I think being true to, you have to be true to yourself, but I think the best thing to do is set objective goals, right? Like, what does progress actually look like? That's, I think, the first thing. I think the other thing is to get really good with deadlines, due dates, implementing a task tracking system so you can see progress, right? If you have these in place, you can see if the team's moving forward, right? I think the other thing is really prioritizing, like, where should your time be spent? If you can find if you're spending all day micromanaging and on top of your team, then your tasks for yourself, your goals, your responsibilities aren't clear, right? So for me, I couldn't even imagine micromanaging. I couldn't imagine staying on top of things because I'm just too busy, right? So it's really getting those priorities in check and being able to measure progress all around with you, with your team, with anyone that you're working with. And if you have those goals in place, if you see that happening, if you are achieving these goals, it makes it a lot easier to have a conversation with your team. At least that's been my experience.
No, I agree. That's great. Well put too. We're going to take a quick commercial break. When we come back, we're going to ask Cory about when should you keep certain tasks in-house and which ones should you outsource. We're going to do that right after this break.
You don't need another cookie cutter platform. You need a partner who understands what your business needs to grow. That's Miva. From complex B2B setups to high volume D2C stores, we've seen it all. Head to miva.com/podcast for a free site audit and see what's possible.
Yeah, so head on over to miva.com/podcast, get that free site audit. Just sign up the form, and we'll get somebody to get a hold of you and take a look at your website and see what's going on with it and what's wrong and what could be fixed on it. Get a free site audit. So head on over to miva.com/podcast. So I'm Rob Stanley with E-commerce Revamped. Of course, we got Cory Blumenfeld of BlueMoso. We're talking about how to build outsourced teams at scale. And right before the break, I was going to ask Cory, when should you keep tasks in-house versus outsourcing those? What's the answer to that, Cory?
I guess it depends for every single type of business. I think in today's world, it makes it so much easier to outsource. There's all this talk about the one-person business. I'm sure you've heard about this. There's the next billion-dollar one-person business. Well, most of the work for those businesses are going to be outsourced. So it's super easy to do that and to build a team that is outsourced. So when is the right time to outsource, or what tasks should be outsourced versus what shouldn't? I think there's a lot of things that founders should be owning. So if you're a one-person business, the relationships with the clients shouldn't be outsourced for the most part. The sales shouldn't be outsourced. You can outsource this, right? Certain aspects like the business development work or the lead enrichment work. But, the actual relationship piece, that's why an individual is choosing to work with you. They want to know who you are. They want to know what your business is about. So if it's relationship based, I think that should be in-house. But for the most part, I think almost any task can be outsourced in today's world. I think that there's more room than ever to be a solo founder or a small business and outsourcing most of the work that needs to be done, and then just focusing on the service delivery and providing a really amazing experience to your clients.
I love that answer. There's so many times I've seen people outsource their sales department, and you get these funky emails that you just know are not from the owner. They're maybe not quite grammar correct. And you're just like, this just doesn't make sense, right?
Yeah.
So I love how you put that. Anything I would say that's out facing, whether it's sales, maybe even some marketing, or some of the marketing in the background can be. But if it's a face of a marketing, you got to definitely have them, available and not outsource that. Great answer to that.
I think
Now, what
it's all
about?
relationship based, right?
Mhm.
Like that is what business is today. All these social media platforms and it's to build trust, right? And so the behind the scenes, yes, but when you're speaking to someone, I think your job as a business owner is to get that publicity, right? It's to be seen, it's to be heard, and you can't replace it. Even if you're doing sales, if you want to drive something forward, be known, build trust, and you can't outsource that. So you have to be comfortable with being seen.
Yeah.
And you can have teams help you be seen, get you in front of those places, but you can't have them do that for you, because it needs to be your voice that people are hearing.
Absolutely. Can you imagine if I tried to outsource this podcast? I mean, I've got 20 plus years of experience in e-commerce. It'd be hard to find somebody that has that and understands that, So Cory, transitioning back to, okay, when you're working with this team, you've kind of got your team established. How do you kind of make sure that your team takes ownership in this process, in helping you and being part of that? So how do you create that ownership in a team?
Yeah, give them the trust that they deserve, right? If you don't trust them, there's a red flag from day one, right? So trust, super important. Give them goals. Be transparent. Create an open work environment, right? Like, let them know how they're adding value to the business, to the customers. Don't keep them in like a glass box and hide them from everyone. You build loyalty by making them feel like they have the ability to make decisions to push the business forward. So I think it's a lot of these basic concepts, right, that for some reason some business owners don't implement. But if you make them feel valued, if you make them feel important, if you make them feel like they can move the business forward, they'll give it their all, right? Be a leader that other people want to follow, right? Show them, set the example. When you are delegating, when you are outsourcing, it's not a free pass to stop doing any work. As a business owner, as a leader, as a manager, you should still be doing more work than these individuals, just more high level work. And you need to make that seen so your team follows in that direction.
I kind of think of it this way. And I've worked with or I've known a bunch of other sellers that almost they build an org chart of their outsourced team, and then they'll spot somebody who's got leadership abilities, put them into a leadership role, and let them delegate down. And, the same thing as building an org chart company. I think that's super smart. You just mentioned it right there, identifying those kind of leadership people, trusting them to do their job, trusting them to help others do their job. And that's the way it should be. I mean, the right outsourcing when it's done correctly and you find the right team, it's a masterpiece, right? It makes you just even better, makes your company even better. What about when it comes to, when you're outsourcing, a lot of people, first thing they think is either India or the Philippines. There is a lot of different outsourcing. It depends what you're looking for. But what about when it comes to culture? When you're dealing with like some of these teams, sometimes there's different holidays in different countries. There's different things going on. So, what cultural traits kind of should you keep an eye on when it comes to your remote team, and how do you kind of work within those?
Yeah, I think it's being fair and loyal, understanding that there are differences, understanding that there are different holidays. For us, what we do is we try to be as fair as we can, right? So we know that there's different holidays. Most of the teams in the Philippines, we pay them and we make it it's voluntary that they can work on those days. And so we pay them more. We give them the option to work, and for us, in terms of accountability, we make it a safe and fair environment for them to come to work every single day. It's not hostile, but we try to show respect. And you get great talent all over the world, right? And I think it just comes down to being fair to folks. Just because they're in a different country, just because you're outsourcing doesn't mean you get to treat them differently. At least that's what we've seen at BlueMoso. If we treat them like any other type of worker, right, and we treat them with respect, they're going to show us respect, and they're going to put their best foot forward. So there are differences. We take those into account, but we treat them just like we would treat any other, or at least, internally we treat them like any other employee. And location isn't really a differentiator.
That makes sense. I mean, Miva is a fully remote company. So, that's for us, it's kind of easy because we've been fully remote for a long time. I've been fully remote for a long time. We talked a little bit about some tools, Cory. We're talking about Loom. I think it was Script we were talking about. What other tools might you suggest that people use when they're outsourcing that you've kind of seen, different customers use, or ones you suggest for people?
Yeah, so Loom, Notion for documentation, Google Drive, Google Sheets, like very basic, right? But ClickUp, Asana for task management. Just having the tech stack, right? That works for you. Having these tools in place. I hear so many founders that are just like, I don't like this tool, and they don't use it. But there are a lot of tools that I don't like, but I use them because I know they're going to help the team. So having a tech stack that works for the team is the most important thing. Slack for communication, WhatsApp for communication. There just needs to be something in place to promote communication, to promote organization, to promote project management, to promote things that are getting done. It doesn't matter what they are, just have something in place that works for the team, not just for you.
Yeah. Cory, what about when you're scaling, you hire that first person, you kind of get going. Tell us a little bit of what's different between running a team with one person and then scaling up to, let's say, like 10 hires. What kind of things are different when that? And, what kind of changes do you see from a smaller team to a 10-person type team?
Yeah. So we're over 40 at this point. We've done that in less than a year. It's adapting to the needs of other people. I think as a leader, a lot of times we tend to focus on what we need to succeed. When it's one other person, it's kind of the same thing. It's like, what do I need to succeed? There's only one other person here. But as you build out a team, it's how can I adapt to the people around me? How can I support them in growing? How can I make sure that they succeed? So that is the real differentiator. I think as the team grows past 10 or grow, it's creating systems, right, that keeps everyone in check. It's promoting really good communication. I really promote over communication. I think that's the most important thing. There's data that shows if you repeat things 5 times, that's finally when things start to stick. And so it's repetition, documentation, setting up channels for communication, showing what good communication looks like, and having the tools in place, like you were saying, right, before you start to scale. And so as you scale, things may break, but they won't break as bad as they could. So, we really focus on systems internally to make sure that everyone succeeds. And we are stress testing these systems all the time. And, we're also pushing forward, trying to break things and then finding solutions as they break.
I think you brought up a really good point, Cory, and that was about, things breaking and kind of having control of things, and so I have a question for you. I've seen people where sometimes they only need, let's say, a part-time person.
Yeah.
Now, a lot of times we know that when you get a part-time person, when you outsource, they have other jobs. They have another job they need to do to fill the rest of that day, or depending how many shifts they're working, right? So how do you kind of make sure that as you're kind of growing, that your brand sort of image, brand voice stays the same when you're getting maybe somebody who's a part-timer and you haven't quite got to a full-time position? Or even, let's say, when you go from 1 to 10 people, how do you kind of protect that brand voice and make sure that it stays consistent, as you grow?
Yeah, no, great question. This was a gap that we saw in the market and something that we are actively solving, right? And I think it lends itself to our model. These individuals that you're outsourcing to, they need full-time work. Just working 2 hours doesn't make sense. And so, for us personally, what we've built out is a model where we make it easy. We wanted to reduce the barriers, and we understand for individuals just starting out, they don't need as many hours. And maybe as they're scaling up, they need to add more. So it needs to be very simple to bring on folks. So, at BlueMoso, we created a system where you get access to a pool of talented individuals. And, for other folks out there, feel free to steal this because, it works really well. You get an access to a pool of individuals. We make it easy to start with a minimum of an hour, and we allow you to scale up. And we have for all of our VAs, we have kind of like a 3-level system, right? We have an executive team. These are the individuals that are really good at building SOPs, communicating with clients, dealing with the admin stuff. Then we have our team leads that manage the VAs that we work with. These individuals are like project managers. They stay on top of the VAs. They make sure things are getting done. They also communicate with the client and are managed by the executive team. And then we have the VAs who are the executors, right? And between the team leads and the executive team, we help them manage. So we have this really good structure in place for how we communicate with the team and how we communicate with the client. We also make it easy for them to start with a minimum number of hours. And in doing so, right, so in having this structure, we can then also schedule the VAs to work on other accounts, but we also have a really good knowledge base of what the client wants. You mentioned how do we ensure that we're capturing the client's voice? Well, that comes down to the team leads and to the executive team members, making sure that everything is well documented about the client, right? They act as the individuals that manage the client's account. They train the VAs. They make sure everyone has all the information they need to be successful, even if the time with the client is limited. So that's kind of our model, how we do things. But we found that this is a real issue. Like, there's no point of hiring someone when you don't need a full-time, even part-time work. You just need the time that you need, right? And so we remove barriers, and it led to more clients.
Perfect. I'm glad you brought that up. We're going to talk about BlueMoso in just a second. But I do have one last question for you. And this is kind of an important one. What is your thoughts on outsourcing to AI versus outsourcing to an actual individual person? I'm sure you're getting asked that question. I'm sure that subject's coming up. I'm not the first to ask this, but give us your thoughts on that, Cory.
Yeah, I think with AI, there's more of a need to outsource than ever, right? These systems still need people running them. You don't need as many people running them. So, wherever you can use AI, whether it's agents, whether it's just basic AI tools, you should use them, right? It also means you don't need as big of a team. You don't need as many partners. There's so much more that you can do as an individual. But you still need individuals to help you manage all these things, to connect these systems, because they're not all connected today. So I think AI plays a very helpful role. I use it every day. And because of that, I'm able to do so much more. I'm able to be more efficient with my time. But I still need my team to manage all the clients that we have, to provide that human connection, right? Because part of having a business is being real, being there for a client, and the team's able to do that. And I think one anecdote that always stands out, I think, I don't know, maybe it was the 70s or the ATM came out or whenever it came out, and all the bank tellers were scared, oh, we're going to lose our jobs. And, you look at today, there's more bank tellers than there ever were. So even with AI, I don't think it's going to replace all workers. I think it's going to create different roles, different opportunities for folks, and you have to adapt to that. And that's what our team's doing right now. We're adapting to the rules that people need, and we're leveraging AI to make people more efficient.
I love the ATM analogy. That was perfect. I mean, I'll use an ATM when the line's too big inside. Otherwise,
Yeah.
I'd prefer to go inside, right? Because there's just things you can't talk to an ATM and tell it. Listen, everybody. So I want Cory to go ahead and give us a whole explanation of BlueMoso, what kind of service you guys offer, how to get a hold of you. Cory, tell everybody about BlueMoso and what you guys do.
Yeah, thank you. So BlueMoso, we help business owners get their freedom back, so they can focus on building the business, not working in the business. We help folks with a variety of different tasks, whether it's content creation on social media to basic admin work. Have a client that one of our VAs is acting as her personal assistant, helping her plan her wedding. I have a VA running another person's e-commerce store, so they can focus more on the partnerships with the e-commerce vendors. There's a variety of different tasks. And then we also focus on content creation, copywriting, different marketing tasks. So data entry, business development support, lead enrichment. So there's a variety of different admin and operational tasks that we can help with. We just want to help founders really get their time back and scale their businesses. You can find me at hello@bluemoso.com. So if you need to email me, or you can go to our website. You can also find me on LinkedIn as well. I'm pretty active there as a content creator. But yeah, just feel free to reach out to me. I'm here to help. And I love talking business and talking scale and solving issues or problems for folks.
Excellent. So for everybody listening, that's BlueMoso, BlueMoso.com. And then, of course, he said hello@BlueMoso.com. So those are listening. You can write that down, or be sure to reach out to Cory if you have any questions or you're interested in the service. It's a great service. I've seen examples of it, and we've been using a little bit over here at Miva, and I absolutely love what they're doing and helping us out. And Cory, thank you so much for coming on. This is such great information. So listen, folks, it's pretty plain and simple. You need to focus more on making money and stop focusing necessarily on the day-to-day when you get to a certain point, right? I understand when you're first starting, you need to do it all and get it going, but make sure to document like we talked about. And then, when you get to that point, you're feeling a little overwhelmed. That's the time to reach out, and that can happen fairly quickly, or just reach out to Cory and just ask what kind of task. Maybe you just need somebody for a few projects. I'm sure that, he'll help you out with even just project stuff. You maybe don't need a full-time person to get going. You just need somebody to help you out occasionally. Reach out to BlueMoso.com. And Cory, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. I really appreciate it. It was kind of short notice getting you on, and I really appreciate you rearranging your schedule and jumping on with me. I think this is really important, especially for e-commerce sellers in this age of things changing so quickly, and costs going up, and they trying to figure out how to get more work done with less money. So definitely reach out to BlueMoso and reach out to Cory. Hit him up on LinkedIn too. Make sure you hit up Cory on LinkedIn. Follow a bunch of the great information that he posts out there. And thank you again, Cory, for coming on the E-commerce Revamp podcast. I really do appreciate it. And thank you, everybody, for listening. And we'll see you all on the next episode.
Thanks for tuning in to E-commerce Revamp. Ready to find out what's holding your site back? Get a free expert audit at Miva.com and see where you're leaving money on the table. Until next time, keep your carts full and your customers coming back.